Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In a city where power dictates every move and appearances matter more than truth, General Marquezine Turner stood tall, her uniform impeccable, her medals glittering in the sunlight. 48 years old, black, proud, and respected, she had risen through the ranks of the army through unwavering discipline, extraordinary strategic intelligence, and unwavering courage. Yet today, her world was about to turn upside down. In the luxurious halls of the county courthouse, she was about to meet Judge Jonathan Whitmore, a man known for his influence, arrogance, and corruption hidden behind a charming smile. Whitmore had always despised those he deemed lesser, and secretly dreamed of seeing the powerful general break before him. Marquezine didn't yet know that this meeting, which was supposed to be a simple administrative formality, would turn into a public humiliation orchestrated by a man whose only strength seemed to be his title and his network. But she also didn't know that this affront would trigger a relentless revenge, a meticulous plan to expose the truth and overthrow the man who dared to doubt her worth. 5 days. 5 days would be enough to transform the humiliation into a lesson in justice that no one would ever forget. General Marquezine Turner entered Judge Jonathan Whitmore's office, her step steady, her gaze straight, but her heart slightly tense. The space exuded power, thick carpet, solid mahogany furniture, portraits of illustrious judges on the walls. Whitmore, seated behind his imposing desk, looked up from his files with a cold, calculating smile. "General Turner, sit down," he said in a honeyed but condescending voice. Marquezine stood for a moment, refusing to show any hesitation. "Thank you, Your Honor," she replied, before sitting down with impeccable posture. Whitmore gestured dramatically toward a leather chair. "Let's see. You know, I've always admired your military exploits. But some wonder, how did a black woman achieve such rank so young?" The implication was clear. His eyes shone with malicious satisfaction, as if every word was intended to demean her. Marquezine took a deep breath, measuring each word. "With skill, dedication, and discipline, like all officers who serve with honor, Your Honor." Whitmore burst out laughing dryly. "Ah, discipline, yes. But you have to admit that sometimes, merit isn't enough. You also have to be in a good position." Marquezine felt a cold anger rise within her. She knew Whitmore was trying to unsettle her, to make her doubt her worth. But she didn't give in. She watched the judge's every gesture, every calculated smile, and mentally noted anything that might be useful later. "I'm here to deal with administrative matters, not to discuss my personal background," she said calmly. "I'd rather we stay on topic." Whitmore leaned forward, his fingers interlaced, and almost whispered, "Oh, I understand. But you know, some like to see those who think they're untouchable fall a little." The tone was threatening, but Marquezine showed no fear. She stood up then, letting the judge sense her determination. "I may be here to answer your questions, Your Honor, but I assure you, I will not fall." Whitmore forced a smile, convinced he'd planted the first seed of doubt. What he didn't know was that Marquezine Turner had already begun plotting her silent revenge. 5 days later, a public lecture was held at the courthouse. Whitmore had decided to use this opportunity to attack Marquezine in full view of the entire city. Curious journalists filled the room, their cameras trained on the scene. Marquezine entered, standing straight as a banner. Every step echoed in the room, and everyone could see her presence, her dignity intact. But Whitmore, from his lectern, gave nothing away. He began to speak, diverting attention with subtle innuendos. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, a wry smile on his lips, "we sometimes have to examine whether certain individuals are holding positions for which they are truly qualified." He pointed at her dramatically. "Take General Turner, for example. Some say she's a paragon of military competence, others wonder if her advancement has more to do with quota policies than." A murmur rippled through the room. Cameras zoomed in on Marquezine. Reporters noted every word. Whitmore savored every second of discomfort he thought he was causing. But Marquezine didn't move. She breathed deeply, holding her composure like armor. Then, in a clear voice, she answered. Your Honor, it is surprising that you would use your position to cast doubt on an officer's integrity in public. Allow me to reiterate that my career is the result of decades of service, strategy, sacrifice, and proven leadership in the field. Whitmore frowned, visibly irritated by his composure. But the room was now divided. Some journalists noted his words with admiration, others hesitated, influenced by the judge's insinuations. Despite the tension, Marquezine knew she had just planted a seed, her dignity remained intact, and she had captured the attention of those ready to listen to the truth. When she left the room, Whitmore believed he had humiliated her. What he didn't know was that Marquezine was beginning to formulate a precise plan to turn the tables and expose her corruption for all to see. Back at her headquarters, Marquezine Turner sank into her chair, not with discouragement, but with intense concentration. Whitmore's public humiliation, far from weakening her, had ignited within her a cold, methodical determination. She knew that retaliating with words or emotion would be futile, she had to act strategically. Her plan began with a simple but essential step, gathering irrefutable evidence of Whitmore's corruption. For several hours, Marquezine combed through every accessible document, every questionable court order, every suspect contract. She knew that for every accusation she made, she needed solid, impeccable evidence. She noted every name, every date, every anomaly, knowing that Whitmore would try to prevent her from revealing the truth. Then she turned to witness statements. Some of the judge's former assistants and subordinates had witnessed questionable practices but feared reprisals. Marquezine approached them cautiously, offering them anonymity and security. Little by little, she began to build a dossier that could shatter Whitmore's impeccable facade. This step required patience and silence. No word was to be uttered, no gesture was to betray her intentions. Every move was calculated, every conversation monitored. Marquezine knew that the most effective revenge wasn't the kind you saw coming, but the kind that struck when no one expected it. That night, as the city fell asleep, Marquezine lay awake, methodically working on her plan. In the quiet of her study, she silently repeated. 5 days is enough for the truth to come out. Marquezine knew that to overthrow a man as powerful as Judge Whitmore, she couldn't act alone. She needed to find someone who understood the justice system, who knew the workings of power, and who could help her turn her evidence into a relentless strategy. That's when she thought of David Harper, a retired military prosecutor. Known for his reputation for rigor and integrity, Harper had already denounced several corrupt judges, but had been forced to step down due to political pressure. Marquezine contacted him discreetly by phone. Colonel Harper? This is General Marquezine Turner. I need your help. At the other end of the line, Harper's deep, cautious voice answered, General Turner. It's been a long time. But tell me, what brings you to contact me now? She explained the situation succinctly, Whitmore's public insinuations, his attempted humiliation, and most importantly, the evidence she had begun to gather of his corruption. Harper listened attentively, occasionally interrupting to ask pointed questions, revealing his intimate knowledge of the system's flaws. All right, Harper said finally. If what you're describing is true, we have a unique opportunity here. But we'll have to proceed with caution. Whitmore has allies everywhere. One mistake, and everything could collapse. Together, they developed a discreet but methodical plan. Marquezine would provide all her evidence, documents, recordings, and anonymous testimonies. Harper would verify their authenticity and prepare a strategy to present them irrefutably, while protecting their sources. This unexpected alliance gave Marquezine a sense of strength and control. She was no longer alone, every document verified, every testimony corroborated, every detail meticulously noted brought the general closer to her goal, to expose Whitmore and restore his honor. That night, she still couldn't sleep. But this time, excitement replaced anxiety. Revenge was no longer a mere hope, it was becoming a certainty. Whitmore had begun to sense that something was amiss. Since the public humiliation, he had been watching Marquezine closely. Her files were mysteriously disappearing from her desk, some assistants seemed nervous, and crucial information was circulating without her knowledge. Convinced he had to act quickly, Whitmore sent threatening messages to Marquezine, demanding that she cease all suspicious activity and implying that she could be punished for insubordination. He also mobilized his allies in the justice system to limit her access to documents and monitor her communications. But Marquezine, far-sighted, had anticipated these maneuvers. She used secure channels to communicate with David Harper, avoiding traditional phones and emails that Whitmore could monitor. Every piece of evidence she gathered was copied and stored in a secure location, protected from tampering. Frustrated, Whitmore began to underestimate Marquezine's determination and methodology. He believed that mere psychological pressure would be enough to make her bend. He didn't understand that the general had transformed humiliation and threat into a silent, methodical, and precise force. In her office, Marquezine sat down in front of her documents, a calm smile on her lips. "Every move you make, Whitmore, brings me a little closer to the truth," she whispered. That was the night she realized this. Whitmore was no longer the predator, he was prey to a strategy he had never seen coming. The 5 days she had given herself to plan her revenge were beginning to take shape. Marquezine Turner knew that to defeat a man like Whitmore, words alone wouldn't be enough. She needed irrefutable proof, something that would demonstrate his corruption without leaving any loopholes. With the help of David Harper, she began examining confidential files she had obtained through secure channels. They quickly discovered rigged contracts, suspicious wire transfers, and audio recordings showing Whitmore accepting bribes and manipulating court decisions to protect his allies. Each file was meticulously reviewed. Marquezine and Harper compared documents with official decisions, cross-referenced dates, and noted inconsistencies. The evidence was overwhelming. Whitmore had repeatedly abused his power, jeopardizing justice and his personal integrity. Marquezine felt a mixture of relief and determination. She knew she now had in her hands the weapon capable of bringing down the judge. But she remained cautious. Whitmore would soon try to defend himself, and every move had to be calculated to prevent him from discovering the source of the information. "David, that's enough," she said finally, staring at the documents. "With this, he doesn't stand a chance. He won't be able to deny the truth." Harper nodded. "Exactly. And when we strike, it will be irrefutable. Everyone will know he's been exposed for what he really is." For the first time since the initial humiliation, Marquezine felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Revenge was no longer a mere project, it was imminent. The 5 days she had given herself were approaching their climax, and Whitmore, for all his power, could do nothing to prevent it. 5 days after the initial humiliation, Marquezine Turner entered the large conference room, her steady stride and piercing gaze sweeping over the gathering. Reporters, cameras and microphones in hand, waited for her every word. The atmosphere was electric. Beside her, David Harper discreetly watched her every move. They both knew this would be a crucial moment. Marquezine stepped onto the stage and spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I am here to set the record straight on the accusations against me and to expose corrupt practices that have tarnished justice in our city." She scrolled through documents, audio recordings, and captures of financial transactions on a screen behind her, all related to Judge Jonathan Whitmore. Each piece of evidence was presented with clarity and precision. Murmurs erupted in the room, the evidence was relentless. Whitmore, sitting in the front row, paled at the sight of his actions being publicly revealed. He tried to intervene, but Marquezine continued implacably. "These documents show that Judge Whitmore repeatedly abused his power, manipulating court decisions, accepting bribes, and using his influence to intimidate and humiliate individuals, including me." The assembly remained silent, captivated. Reporters frantically took notes, some filming the scene live. Marquezine had transformed the humiliation she had suffered 5 days earlier into a public triumph. At the end of her presentation, she concludes in a clear voice. "Justice should never be corrupted by arrogance or greed. I stand here to remind everyone that courage and integrity are more powerful than fear and manipulation." A standing ovation erupted in the room. Whitmore, unable to speak, realized that his facade had just crumbled. Marquezine, calm and majestic, had just transformed the role of victim into that of victor. After the press conference, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The media relayed the damning evidence against Whitmore, social media erupted, and public pressure became unbearable. Judge Whitmore attempted to downplay the facts, claiming that the documents were forged. But every attempt at defense collapsed in the face of the evidence presented by Marquezine and validated by David Harper. The judicial authorities had to intervene quickly to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control. In the days that followed, Whitmore was suspended from his duties and an official investigation was launched. Journalists and citizens discovered the extent of his corruption, bribery, manipulated decisions, and systematic abuse of power. The man who thought he could intimidate and humiliate the general now found himself isolated, ridiculed, and disarmed. Marquezine, meanwhile, remained calm but determined. Every step of her strategy had worked perfectly. The city, which had witnessed her humiliation, now saw her courage and insight in a whole new light. Whitmore's colleagues were turning away from him, his political allies were beginning to shun him, and his reputation was irreversibly tarnished. 5 days after the incident that should have been her downfall, Marquezine Turner was now the one holding power. The revenge wasn't just a restoration of her honor, it was a shining example of justice and resilience in the face of corruption. With Whitmore's fall, the entire town began to recognize Marquezine Turner's integrity and courage. Her fellow soldiers, subordinates, and even those who had doubted her just days earlier came to express their respect. The newspapers now headlined "The General Who Challenged Corruption," and social media was full of messages of support and admiration. Marquezine wasn't looking for fame, but she felt a deep satisfaction in seeing that the truth had finally triumphed. At her headquarters, she gathered her officers. "Respect isn't demanded, it's earned," she said calmly. "And you must always fight for what's right, even when the situation seems hopeless." The young officers, inspired by his determination and strategic intelligence, understood that true strength lies not in intimidation or violence, but in patience, preparation, and perseverance. Marquezine Turner became a symbol of resilience. Her story spread far beyond the city, inspiring others to stand up for their rights, never bow to abuses of power, and believe in justice, even when it seems corrupt. Whitmore, meanwhile, gradually faded from public view, unable to rebuild his reputation. The general, on the other hand, moved forward with dignity, her honor restored and her position strengthened. A few weeks after the Whitmore affair, Marquezine Turner stood on the balcony of her headquarters, gazing out over the city below. The setting sun bathed the streets in a golden light, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a deep calm wash over her. The 5 days of humiliation and struggle now seemed like a thing of the past. The town had seen Whitmore's true colors, a woman capable of transforming fear and shame into strength and justice. Her officers, colleagues, and even civilians often came to her for advice, inspired by her courage and determination. Marquezine knew that her victory was not just personal, it sent a clear message to all who would abuse their power. Justice could triumph, even in the face of the most entrenched corruption. She thought back to the 5 days Whitmore had thought he could break her. Every word, every maneuver, every humiliation had been the catalyst for a methodical and unwavering revenge. What he didn't know was that true strength lies not in domination, but in resilience and strategy. Marquezine turned her eyes toward the horizon and whispered, "Justice cannot be bought. It must be earned, and it always triumphs in the end." And so, General Marquezine Turner became more than a military symbol, she became a symbol of integrity, courage, and perseverance. A living lesson for all those who believe that a title or power is enough to crush others. The city, and beyond, would never forget this story.